You're listening to the Assembly Call IU podcast and postgame show, the place where Indiana fans across the globe hang out online after every IU basketball game. Join us for our live broadcasts on Thursday nights and immediately following every IU game at our website, assemblycall.com. That's assemblycall.com.
And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, your Indiana Hoosiers defeat UC Davis 76-62 to move to 5-1 on the season. It was yet another game in which Indiana really came out sluggish, really struggled to do some of the things we've seen them do when they've been playing well this year. There were too many turnovers early. The defense wasn't very good. And even up in the second half, through about the first 10, 11, 12 minutes of the second half, Indiana's down by 8 points, 9 points, and you kind of start to wonder, okay, are the Hoosiers just going to be able to get out of here with an ugly win? And they did. They clamped down defensively. They made some shots. They did a much better job getting the ball inside, and that's what allowed them to end up winning this one, kind of running away there at the end. But for most of the game, it was much more competitive than what the score indicates. And in fact, for most of the game, UC Davis kind of controlled the action. And we're going to break all of that down here on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I am Jerod Morris. I'm here tonight with the coach, Brian Tonsoni. And let's start tonight's show as we start every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. I want to take you back to about the 7-minute mark in the second half. It's 54-54. Indiana's done a nice job of kind of getting the game under control a little bit and just, getting it back to even. And you kind of feel like, okay, now is the time to really turn it on and make a run. And Indiana did. And while it would be really easy to look at, some of the plays Romeo made offensively, he and Juwan hit back-to-back three-pointers. Justin Smith made a nice three. Al Durham did a nice job of getting to the line. What really drove the turnaround for Indiana was the defense. And they finally started doing the things defensively that they hadn't been doing all game, which was, number one, containing dribble penetration, and number two, really helping out in a smart and timely way. In that possession, it was 54-54. Romeo Langfords lets his man just blow right by him on the left wing. But Juwan Morgan steps up, does a great job of closing off the baseline, and forces the UC Davis guy to step on the baseline, turnover. The next possession, great team defense by Indiana. They defended the dribblers. They defended ball screens, really closed out to the shooters. They end up forcing a shot clock violation. The next possession, Indiana forces a travel. Next possession, Indiana forces another turnover, and on and on. In all, it led to a 22-3 run by Indiana. And again, the 22 was pretty. It's what's going to show up in the highlights, but it's the three, holding them to those 3 points and what they did defensively, just playing good, solid, fundamental pack line defense during that stretch. That's what keyed the turnaround, and that's what keyed the big run by Indiana to end this game. And that's, it's once again another sign of kind of the change in this program's identity. When it was starting to go poorly tonight, and the offense just was struggling to get into a rhythm, they clamped down defensively, it got them back going, and that led to the offense getting back into rhythm, and it was really nice to see. Okay, tonight's Hoosier Proud banner moment brought to you, as always, by our friends at Hoosier Proud, and now their new brand, Home Field. As longtime listeners of this program know, for years, Hoosier Proud has been the best place to find Indiana-themed apparel that is made by Hoosiers for Hoosiers. And back in August, Connor and the team at Hoosier Proud took that expertise and created Home Field, a premium collegiate apparel brand that tells unique stories about a growing list of schools, including IU. The website address is homefieldapparel.com. There you will find designs that you can't find anywhere else. For example, you might have seen the picture that I Instagrammed and tweeted last week wearing the new Tri-Blend Fleece IU hoodie with the vintage IU Bison logo. I love it. A lot of people have asked me, what is that on your sweatshirt? So I have to explain to them what the logo is. But it's a great old school logo and a really comfortable hoodie. Look for it at homefieldapparel.com in the Indiana collection, along with a bunch of other great designs. And then don't forget, back at their original website, HoosierProud.com, you will still find the best State of Indiana-themed apparel, plus our official Assembly Call logo t-shirts, all while sending 10% of your purchase to causes around Indiana, like Habitat for Humanity of Greater Indianapolis. So to review, the two URLs are homefieldapparel.com for IU gear and HoosierProud.com for everything else Indiana, including the Assembly Call shirts.
Get a brother, get some coupons.
And as always, use the promo code ASSEMBLY at checkout to get 15% off your first purchase. That's promo code ASSEMBLY at homefieldapparel.com and HoosierProud.com. All right, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. Tonight, that is one man, the coach, Brian Tonsoni. It is Tonsoni time. What are your opening thoughts, Coach?
Well, I think I said something like this last Sunday on the post-game show, but this is a kind of a throwback to Indiana basketball where you kind of expect them to win, and they pull it out, and they do win. And I think despite some nervousness from a lot of us for a long period of time in tonight's ball game, this is what Indiana basketball has been. And Max Bielefeld said something on the show that when he was looking back at this 1976 scores, that there were a lot of close games, and you think an undefeated team is just going to win by 10, 15, 20 all the time. To win a game by 14, which it probably was a lot closer than that, but which the team did not execute everything well for a long period of time, but to have the strength, the determination to put it together in the last 8 or 9 minutes and come out. And that's the last 2 games against lesser opponents. Wish it was a different scenario, but that's what Indiana basketball has been about. When you're a good program, you're going to have some off nights, and an off night and you win by 14 against a team that's picked in a conference that us bracketologists, that conference is 17th ranked conference. It's not a horrible ball club. So I feel better now that the game's over and we have the win, to be honest. But this team is headed in the right direction, and it's just it's good to see that the closing capabilities.
I have to say, as we watched the majority of tonight's team, I did not expect a positive comparison to the 76 Hoosiers to come up so early in this game. It somehow, given how Indiana played for most of the night, that somehow seems very sacrilegious. But
I don't know if it's a comparison more than just trying to find something to open up the show with after sweating.
But I mean, and to a certain extent, your point is well taken in that Indiana clearly didn't have its A game tonight, and they really struggled. But, in the first half, they clearly leaned on Juwan Morgan, who stepped up and was really just terrific. And we'll break down his performance. And then in the second half, they leaned on that team defense, and it really got them going. And so, let me ask you this, because on the one hand, you look at this, you look at the UT Arlington game, and it is a positive, that given how injury shortened they've been and how few guys have really been able to score points except for Juwan and Romeo and a couple of other guys, you can look at it on the one hand and say, okay, you haven't had your A game, you probably haven't even had your B game, but you found a way to still win going away in the second half, and that seems like a positive sign. On the other hand, I do want to be kind of careful that the team isn't taking the wrong lessons from games like these, where you come out sluggish and then you think, oh yeah, we'll just turn around at the end of the first half and the end of the second half like we did these last couple games, and we'll be fine. From a coach's perspective, can that happen where you kind of fall into that? You get lulled a little bit into thinking we can pace ourselves, or kind of come out without a great mentality, and you'll be able to bail yourself out in the end. Is that at all a concern from games like this?
Yeah, Jerod, I think it is a concern that when you've shown the capability of just flipping the light switch and going on a nice run, that the danger is you're always going to expect to flip on that light switch. And against certain teams, you're not going to be able to do that. So that is a concern, and I'm sure the staff is aware of that. I also wonder how much the injuries play a part in that, where you understand that you can't foul, and you understand that you got to be somewhat careful, and that you're going to be playing major minutes. And there's some things to the NBA and, in our high school team, now we're looking at how long can kids play for maximum effort. And sometimes shorter bursts provide better basketball play. Well, the true fact of these injuries is there are no short bursts. You do get the TV timeouts, which is nice in college, but still the stress could lead to some, I don't want to say coasting, but finding places within the game to find your rest. And if that seeps in too, so, it's better to win than to lose, even if that light switch fear comes on. But those are all teaching points that I'm sure Archie and his staff are going to have to try to find a way to teach and make sure that that's not a permanent part of Indiana's repertoire to let teams stay in and then turn it on late.
Well, fortunately, if we do have any thoughts like that, the team that we're playing on Tuesday is likely to outscore us 30-0 in the first 4 minutes if we come out and play like that. So we'll get a nice rude awakening if we don't come ready to play in that one. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with the coach, Brian Tonsoni. We are breaking down Indiana's 76-62 victory over UC Davis. Coach, let's talk about Juwan Morgan. I mean, we can probably get the game ball segment out of the way early because it's
done.
Yeah, I mean, Juwan's going to get it. He was marvelous. Do you realize he played 40 minutes tonight? I just saw Jen post that on YouTube, and I was like, I guess I don't remember him leaving. You look at the box score, 40 minutes. Juwan scores 31 points, grabs 10 rebounds. He's 5 of 7 from downtown, which, that's a developing story. His three-point shooting has really been on point this year. He had a streak, I think, in the first half where he made 3 in a row. Rob Finney really did a nice job of finding him on those. A couple of them were in the corner. But, it was, look, Juwan was great. And that defense that I talked about in the banner moment, he was such a huge part of that. The things that he does defensively, I think, sometimes you really have to watch closely to see them because it's a good hedge and a quick recovery, and it's closing off the baseline. It's not always the stuff that kind of jumps out, and he's not always guarding the guy who takes the shot at the end. But I really feel like his defense has really, after a rough first couple of games, his defense has been outstanding. And so as good as the offense was, as necessary as it was to keep Indiana alive in the first half, even on a night when he scored 31 points, I was still more impressed tonight with Juwan's defense. And to do that with that level of focus and effort for 40 minutes, he was just outstanding all around. And Indiana loses tonight if he, basically doesn't play like an All-American, which he played with. So a huge hat tip to Juwan Morgan, who on both ends of the court was absolutely Indiana's star tonight.
Yeah, and I wrote down at the 5:48 mark, he drove the lane, missed, got a rebound tip, missed, got a rebound again, and put it back up. And the coach I work with calls that multiple efforts. And what you're talking about defensively too is to be able to help, to get back out of help, to find the next open guy, to get back to your guy. Those are things that don't show up in any box score stats, but I think Juwan does those things very, very, very well. He has multiple efforts on almost every trip down the court. Defensively, offensively, the same thing. And he hasn't always. There have been some games maybe early where he wasn't as aggressive. I thought today his confidence offensively was, you can't go 5 of 7 from 3 if you're not confident that when you catch the ball, you're going to shoot. And if they're going to leave me open, it's going to go in. And he basically had that mentality that I'm going to score tonight. And then when you guard me, I'm going to go around you. And yes, his play was outstanding. And he put the team on his back in the first half and carried Indiana through to halftime. And it's what seniors are about in college basketball. And we need to appreciate that for the remaining games because you don't have too many seniors anymore with talented players because of leaving early. But when you have a senior like that can carry a team when they're struggling, it is just an asset to have on this Indiana club.
He is now a Zeiss Loftian 9 of 15 from downtown this year from three-point range, which is outstanding. I mean, obviously that's the kind of thing that NBA teams wanted to see from him. And on a night like tonight, Indiana really needed those threes. I mean, they were big threes. The ones in the first half kept Indiana in it. The ones in the second half helped to kind of extend a lead that had been building. But he also didn't fall in love with it too much and still remembered what his bread and butter is and got down low and did some work under the basket. Let's talk, before we break, let's talk real quick about Romeo Langford, who I thought picked his spots offensively, and in the second half when Indiana went on the run, you saw, the one finish he had on the baseline that Max Bielfeldt, who was commentating for the game, mentioned. That was, he just does a few things athletically every game that make you go, wow. In this game, Romeo did more things that made me kind of slap my head than in most games. I thought tonight was by far his worst defensive performance of the night. I thought on a lot of possessions, Indiana was scrambling because Romeo wouldn't fight through a screen or just kind of gave up on a play, and it really got the rest of the guys out of sync. And when you're playing the pack line, as we've gone over in our Basketball 201 segments on Banner Monday, you got to have all 5 guys on the same page. You got to be communicating. You got to be fighting through screens and getting back and helping, or else guys end up running ragged. And I thought a lot of good looks UC Davis got. It might not have been Romeo's man, but they got the look because he was just kind of disengaged defensively. So, look, you credit him because he scored 20 points. He had a couple of threes. He knocked down his free throws in the second half. And so offensively, he really helped Indiana put the clamps down and was better defensively during that run. But for the majority of the night, his coasting on defense really, really hurt this team tonight. And so that's something that against better competition, he's going to have to be better at because he's not going to be able to score enough points to compensate for that many defensive lapses.
Yeah, and he's going to have to find that by Tuesday. to be honest, or he'll get really exposed in that game. I did not see the last game due to coaching duties, but I heard from some friends texting that he was giving up some drives in that game as well. The one that really bothered me tonight was he got jab stepped by one of the guys, and the guy just drove in and laid it in, and then we didn't have help. You're going to get beat off the dribble in college basketball. That Shorts kid is tough. Durham and Finney had their trouble with him. You get any good guard with the ability to get downhill, and you're going to lose some in a ball game. That's where your gap integrity has to be there, your help rotations, but you can't allow it to be too easy. And I thought Romeo and some other Indiana players today just allowed the UC Davis guys to get to the lane too directly. And what you want to do if they are going to beat you is take a circular route a little bit to where you can adjust the defense with help, not a direct drive. And Romeo gave up a lot of direct drives, and that's just locking in, picking a foot, knowing which hand, and watching all those things we were told. Watch the stomach so you don't get faked out. But it's got to be intentional, and sometimes your scorers don't have very good intentions on defense. You'll find that in every level that it's about getting buckets, and I'm not saying he's doing that but it's got to be intentional to play defense, and sometimes kids don't like to play defense as much as they like to shoot, and Romeo's going to have to get better at it. But again, it's nice getting better at it when you're 20 and 5 rebounds. And
that helps. And, in fairness,
when you can do that, you can miss a few drives.
Yes. Yes. I mean, in fairness, as Jamil says in the YouTube chat, Romeo's probably timid after a fractured nose. I don't know what the nose injury is. Maybe that would make you timid fighting through some screens. I don't know, but it's a habit that we've started to see from him the last few games. And in fairness, he plays 39 minutes, was still able to produce. I will say, seeing 0 assists for him, I did think on the offensive end, he seemed to be pressing a little bit more tonight, especially after he didn't get his first field goal until about the 4.5-minute mark in the first half. And he really seemed to be looking for his shot and not as much driving to pass as we saw from him early. So, and the 3 turnovers as well. So, I don't know how much that injury plays into it and how much just the entire offense being out of rhythm plays into it. But yeah, you're right. When you can, kind of come on here and be critical of Romeo and he still has 20 points and 5 rebounds and is a big part of the big run that you had to put the game away, that shows you how good he is. But to me, it's also a testament to how good we believe he can be as a player when you come on here and try to hold him accountable for both ends of the court. And that, so we're not trying to be overly critical, but, he's a great player and we want to see him play like that at all times.
Absolutely. We call that, take coaching instead of criticism. That when Archie watches tape or any coach watches tape, if they're really good, it doesn't matter how many points they scored. If you miss a drive or you don't help on defense or you miss a block out, that's going to be charted and that's going to be mentioned. And if it's poor defensive play but good offensive play, you're going to come out rated as a poor defender in that game, regardless of who you are. And that's coaching. Criticism is generally effort. But when you're talking about technique and that's just coaching. That's just how to get better. And you can't expect kids to be perfect, but you can coach perfect. And good coaches will coach perfect, and they will coach their stars perfect too. When you don't coach your star perfect, then you have some issues that you might have in the team.
Yep. All righty. Coming up, as we continue our breakdown of Indiana's 76-62 victory over UC Davis, I will point out tonight's meaningful moment you might have missed, and then we will go inside the numbers to highlight the most important statistical notes from the game. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I am Jerod Morris here with the coach Brian Tonsoni, and we are breaking down Indiana's 14-point victory over UC Davis tonight at Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall. It is time for tonight's meaningful moment that you might have missed. So a couple that I want to point out. One, as they showed shots of Archie on the sidelines in the Indiana bench, you could see an important person sitting behind the bench. Trace Jackson Davis was at Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall tonight taking the game in. And, as we've heard about Trace's recruitment, he's decided to take some time. He's looking at Indiana, looking at Michigan State, looking at UCLA. Wants to, kind of see the teams play. And, of course, for about 30 minutes tonight, you're kind of thinking, okay, Trace is watching this. doesn't really seem like something you would want to be a part of. But on the other hand, I think for a guy like him to be able to see the kind of versatility that Juwan Morgan played with in a position similar to what he would be playing with, being able to step out, being able to go inside, hopefully that's something where he kind of saw himself in that and could kind of visualize, and saw this Indiana team tough it out and win the game. So, nice to see Trace there. Hopefully he, took something positive from the experience, especially those final 10 minutes. But Coach, I thought there was an important play in the second half that, not a highlight play, but I thought it kind of got Indiana going a little bit. It was 48-40 because, again, after Indiana had done a nice job of closing it out there at the end of the first half, and it was 38-36 at halftime, UC Davis comes right out, and they go on a 10-4 run to start the second half. And you're thinking, man, here we go again. We don't come out and play well in the second half. We're giving this team some life. And when it was 48-40, Evan Fitzner on the offensive end grabbed a really tough rebound. He kicked it out to Rob Finney, and Rob was wide open from three-point range. Could have very easily, gone up and shot that, but he'd been struggling shooting, had missed a couple of threes up until that point. He passes up the three, which would have been a good shot, but he drives inside, draws the defense, dishes to Juwan Morgan to get a great shot, and it makes it 48-42. That cut it to 6, and I don't believe UC Davis got the lead back out to 6 after that. And it was just, after a sequence of some really bad passes and some poor decisions and even some guys forcing some shots, I just thought it showed a little bit of Rob's maturity, especially given how many poor decisions he made in the first half, because we'll get to this, but I thought he played some of his worst basketball early in the game. To have the presence of mind to pass that shot up and get the ball to Juwan for a better look, I thought was indicative of what this team needs to be doing offensively. And Rob did finish with 8 assists, did have 3 turnovers. But that, to me, was an important play in the second half and kind of got the ship righted a little bit and started to get Indiana back on the track, toward what they would ultimately do, which is win this game by 14. Anything about that play that stands out to you, Coach?
Yeah, that's outstanding awareness within the game. And that's so good from a coaching standpoint to have a player who knows their own game. And his own game was a little bit off. And so what he did is he did the next best fundamental thing, which was shot fake, drive, get an assist to the player who has been hot all game. That is stuff you try to teach, in practice and film sessions, and then you just love to see it applied in the game. And there it was at a key moment, down 48. And it is a lack of selfishness, or it's truly unselfish play by your point guard, which is why everyone likes Finney as their point guard. Struggling, not hitting the three. I'm going to run the offense or make an offensive play and get a teammate a shot. So, yes, I think that was a huge, huge play. And I also think that leads, Jerod, your comment leads to the idea that I thought we took a lot of contested shots, and our shot selection was not very good throughout the game. And you mentioned it with Romeo, and I thought some players, and maybe it's just the offense, because for the first time I was questioning, what were we really trying to accomplish offensively for a long time? But it looked like UC Davis was getting open jumpers, and we were taking contested shots all game. And it's good to see that settled down at crunch time, and whether that was an adjustment at halftime or after that burst in the second half for UC Davis, that was good to see as well. But yes, that play was huge to get the ball rolling, to get back even, and then surge ahead later.
I'll tell you another play that to me was meaningful was Rob Finney taking that charge late on shorts. Because, that and just some of the other plays he made late, what we're learning about Rob Finney is how mentally tough he is. Because, again, I thought he really came out and played poor, like surprisingly so. He looked really out of sync offensively, had some uncharacteristic bad passes. I didn't think his defense was very good early either. I thought he wasn't fighting through screens. And, you just look at the stats. Shorts, the guard for UC Davis, in the first half, 12 points, 5 of 6 from the field, 5 assists, 1 turnover. He was doing whatever he wanted, and both Rob and Al were guarding him at times. In the second half, Short scores 4 points, 1 of 5 from the field, 2 assists, and 6 turnovers. And a big part of the reason, especially late, was because Rob was just playing him more solidly on defense. Took a couple of charges, really, got in position. To me, it's impressive to see a young guy like Rob be able to battle through those struggles and then come out and play some of his best basketball at the end in crunch time. And that kind of mental toughness is what's going to make him a leader for this program for the next 3 or 4 years. So on the one hand, plenty to criticize from Rob, but I thought he, was able to come back and end up, having a productive game. 8 assists, the 3 turnovers, but ended up turning the defense around there late.
How do you handle individual adversity? How do you handle team adversity? And despite the nervousness that all the Indiana fans had about tonight, this team, we talked about the light switch problem, but this team is learning to handle some adverse moments in this stretch of games this week. And sometimes you need to be punched in order to see how you can take a punch. And I think, Finney ends up with 8 assists and 2 turnovers. That's a 4-to-1 ratio. That's really outstanding assist to turnover ratio for a guard in college. And to have that after he struggled, because he did not play defense very well in the first half, as well as his struggles offensively. But that's again, what you want to see from your competitors, the ability to do that and stay in the fight and keep fighting, even though you're struggling. That next play mentality, that next 4-minute segment mentality. For short memory. Champions have short memory. Forget about what's happened. Let's get back to doing what we're supposed to be doing as a ball club and individually. And Robert displayed that today.
You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with the coach, Brian Tonsoni. We're breaking down Indiana's 76-62 win over UC Davis. Coach, let's go inside the numbers. One number that stands out, UC Davis finishes the game with .97 points per possession. That number was obviously a lot higher early in the game and then just really took a nosedive late. But it's yet another team that Indiana has held under 1 point per possession. I believe that's every team this season. Again, just another sign of the defensive mentality this program has taken. You look at the turnovers tonight. Indiana turns it over 15 times. So, again, that is an issue. Romeo has 3, Justin Smith 2, Robert Finney 3, Juwan Morgan 3. And some of the passes that Indiana made tonight, I don't even know what they were thinking. On some of them, I don't know what Indiana saw because there wasn't a pass there. And then on others, they were just some of the laziest. It's like the type of stuff that you might do in 5-on-0. But man, like the one time Romeo tried to enter the post to Evan Fitzner and just kind of floated it up there and it got stolen. Rob had a couple of passes that were uncharacteristic. So that 15 turnover number really stands out, especially given that Indiana only had 11 assists. Those 8 by Rob, but no one else really stepped up with assists. And from a free throw shooting perspective, still not good, 67%. To the Hoosiers' credit, it was better in the second half as Indiana got into the bonus early. I think they got into the bonus at like the 13-minute mark and then ended up making 11 of their 14 free throws late. Al Durham, 6 for 8 from the line. That was nice to see. Romeo made 5 of 6. So that was really nice to see that at least in the second half when there was even more pressure on those free throws and kind of some angst in the building because the game wasn't going well, they were able to step up and knock down some of those free throws. What numbers stood out to you, Coach?
Well, I'm going to go back and talk to about your first number. I wrote it down at halftime, 1.267, according to Indiana's stat site that I was tracking. And then to end up at 0.97, the second half defense was what we have seen so far this season. And I'm just going to talk about, everyone knows the numbers of injuries that we've had. The other thing that plays subliminally gets into players' minds is, you're not going to get subbed. And you should play every possession like it's potentially your last if you're a player. But I've been there as a player. You've been there as a player. When you're not coming out, okay, so I missed a block out this time. There's just no one left in some ways. And the bench can be that great motivator, or it could be a great thing. I think we saw this week why depth is so important. And the positive this week is that you got some guys some minutes to learn, and we found out about some players too on whether they can be counted on. But as we slowly get Devontae and McRoberts back and hopefully Race back, and I know Jerome's a long question, I think those numbers of minutes, if you're looking at the number of minutes played when you had Romeo at 39 and Durham at 38 and Morgan at 40, those are just way, way, way too high for consistent play. And so I'm looking for those numbers to come down and our play to improve.
A couple other numbers. Bench points tonight, 0. No bench points from the trio of Deron Davis, Demezy Anderson, and Evan Fitzner. They played a combined 23 minutes. And, if Justin Smith had been more consistent, they might not have even played that much, because Justin Smith was the only starter to not play at least 36 minutes. He only played 24. And, for him, it was just another inconsistent game. I mean, he makes that three. He had a couple of nice finishes, but, he had another one that I highlighted where he made a really nice cut to the basket and just kind of short-armed the ball getting up on the rim and missed it. And, look, if this is a guy who has aspirations to play professionally or just be an impact player in the Big Ten, he's too good of an athlete and too powerful of an athlete to not go up there and score there or get the ball on the rim and make them foul him. So, some of that timidness, still there from Justin. And we certainly saw, Archie Miller not that satisfied with him because he only played that many minutes. But, credit to him for coming back, making that three. And I thought his defense was much better late after he spent a little bit of time on the bench. But, yeah, I mean, we've got to get some of those guys back because, it's awesome to be able to count on your starters like this. But we're going to be worn out by the middle of December if we're playing this many minutes. And when you have a gauntlet coming up of Duke, Northwestern, Penn State, Louisville, and Butler, those are all 5 teams that if you don't at least bring a B+, A- effort, you're not going to have a chance to win there. And so we're going to need guys like Deron Davis and especially Evan Fitzner, who just really seems to be struggling to kind of get in the flow offensively. But 0 bench points, that definitely stands out as a statistic that was not good tonight. And I'll tell you the other one, Coach, that we feel better because we ended up winning, and it feels nice because you kind of ended on a high note with that strong play late. But let's not forget that against a team that I think, what was UC Davis coming into this game in KenPom, like 250-something? They were coming into this game, UC Davis was 256. Indiana led for a grand total of 5.5 minutes tonight. It's not good, got themselves in that hole early. And so just because they came out and played better at the end, it doesn't excuse or absolve all of the issues that came before that. So, this is the kind of game that Indiana needed to come out and establish their dominance early, and they didn't. They waited until the end. Good thing they did. But the competition's not always going to be this forgiving moving forward.
Yeah, and that's what makes everyone nervous a little bit, especially, when you look at UC Davis, first 6 games, they shot 35% from the field and 24.8% from three. And then they were splashing threes all over. So was that Indiana's bad defense, or was that UC Davis finally getting the shots to go down that they hadn't gotten to go down all year? And, water finds its level and all the stats work out and regression, those kind of comments. But I think it was a combination. At one point, there was a banked-in shot in the first segment. There was a shot clock, heavy contested heave that went in. And the center, who had 15% threes, 5 of 27 coming in, and he ended up 4 of 9 tonight. But he had 5 for the whole season and hit 4 tonight. So I'm sure he's capable of hitting. But sometimes you run into that. You run into a team that, for whatever reason, found their groove when they're playing you, and if you don't match the intensity early. So, yes, it looks bad because UC Davis was 1-5. They were in the NIT last year. They had, I think, several 3 starters back, 7 players back that was in their rotation. So, they played poorly at the beginning of their schedule, and they're probably finding their way about them too. So, I still think Indiana should have played a lot better, and this one should have been put away about the 16-minute mark of the second half, given where these programs are. But I think we just ran into a team that found some baskets for a little bit tonight too, and we aided them with our lack of intensity. And that's what happens when you let teams hang around. You run into some danger.
Yeah, they were 129th in KenPom last year, and that's why, for folks who were paying attention to our off-season shows, we talked a lot about how, outside of that quintet of games, that I just mentioned, that game plus the Arkansas game, the Duke and Butler, Louisville, Arkansas, Marquette, outside of that quintet, this was probably going to be the next toughest one. Now, they got off to such a bad start, and their numbers looked so bad that this kind of felt like, Mississippi Valley State waltzing in here. But, yeah, this is a better team than that, and they've got some good players. And so I even tweeted before the game, this is a game Indiana should assert their dominance. But at the same time, maybe they're due for a little bit of a bounce back. And that's what happened a little bit. But like you said, Indiana aided that with some of their really lackadaisical play. So certainly feel fortunate to get out of this one with a win, considering how Indiana played for a lot of the night. All right, coming up on the Assembly Call, we'll get right to that, Coach. We continue our breakdown of Indiana's victory over UC Davis. We'll talk about whatever Coach wants to talk about. Also break down the night for Al Durham. That's next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game, plus every Thursday night and Monday afternoon at our website, assemblycall.com. I am Jerod Morris. I'm here with the coach, Brian Tonsoni, talking about Indiana's hard-fought, in some senses disappointing 14-point victory over UC Davis, considering how the Hoosiers played for most of the night, but at least they escaped, avoided disaster on the back, certainly of Juwan Morgan. Coach, you were going to make a point before the break. What were you going to say?
Well, I think it just seemed to me like Indiana did not play with a sense of urgency to start. Passing the ball, you mentioned lackadaisical passes, not getting good screening, defensively letting people just drive the lane, those types of things. And then you saw the urgency pick up with about 10 minutes. And that's the thing that needs to be fixed. And Archie and his staff need to look at what they're doing, and the players need to look at what they're doing. And there are no excuses. The reason about having injured players and all of that is fine and nice, but your play was what you did tonight. And those guys wore the Indiana jersey, and if they weren't playing with a sense of urgency, then they better bring it in Durham on Tuesday, or it could get ugly. So that's the main concern that I have with the performance. Not so much who we played or where they were, ranked in certain things. Is Indiana needs to play every game with a sense of urgency in order to, maximize the season.
To get back to a point that you mentioned earlier, and just to play devil's advocate, do you think? I mean, you go into this game, obviously, they were buoyed by the fact that Romeo and Al were going to play, which is great, but those starters still probably knew they were going to play the majority of the minutes. Look, I don't think anything excuses like lazy turnovers, because that's, you can do that even if, as you said earlier, you're kind of trying to buy a little bit of rest, because we all want to say you should go 100% on every possession, but we all know if you're going to play 38, 39, 40 minutes, you cannot go all out on every possession. You'll wear yourself out before halfway through the first half. So do you think there could be anything where these guys know they're going to play a ton, so they don't come out with that huge sense of urgency, and then you get to the end of the game and it's like, all right, there's 8 minutes left. Now it's kind of time to leave everything out there. Could that be entering into it at all with them mentally, especially some of the young guys? Or is that being way, way too generous with making excuses?
No, I don't think you don't sit there and tell them that's what happened, so it was okay. You get upset with them that's what happened in the meeting tomorrow when you watch film. And as a coach, then you get mad at them. You walk in your office and you say, yeah, I did that when I was a player too. But you can't tolerate that. But it happens. It happens a lot, like I said, with scores. What's coach going to do? Take me out? He has no one else to score if in certain programs, Yeah. And that's not – I'm not saying the players are thinking that intentionally or out loud, but it just sits subliminally in your head. And especially when you're going to play 38 minutes and, like you said, you can't go all out. Okay, if all four guys think this is my possession to just sit back a little bit, then you don't help, and then you get driven. And but the nice thing is it didn't seep in enough to say they couldn't summon it up after playing 30 minutes. And so, that's where the teaching point comes in. If you could do it at 10 minutes, why didn't you do it at 15? Why didn't you do it coming out of halftime? Why didn't you do it from the start of the game? But I think some of this, no excuse, and maybe a lot of the play since Arkansas is the lack of numbers finally catching up to Indiana.
The problem with that, though, is bad habits can be formed. And that's what I'm starting to see with the turnovers. And that's why I'm now worried about turnovers. I'm just going to say it. It was easy to explain away the first time, even the second time. It's a concerning trend now, because you start to see something 3 games in a row. At some point you just are what you are, and you are what you've been doing. And this team is getting just too much into the habit of making lazy passes, trying to dribble through traffic when it's not there. Look, if they're going to turn the ball over like that against Duke, and it's going to lead to possessions going the other way, game over. Good night. But even more than that, playing teams like Penn State, and Northwestern, and Louisville, and Butler, they aren't anywhere close to the level of Duke, but are still good. They're going to make you pay for that. So that's a big concern for me coming out of this game. And and to me, the lack of depth or that kind of stuff, that doesn't excuse some of the turnovers, because those are habitual things that you look at the programs that are really good at reducing turnovers. They just don't do it, and I think that's seeping in too much. Here's my hope for that, Coach, is that our offense is still finding its rhythm, still getting in sync, and that some of those turnovers are from that, and guys being a little like I thought Rob Finney tonight, just it's like he wasn't quite sure where guys were going to go, and he was kind of tentative, and he wanted to make a pass, but he didn't, so he held on to it for a second longer, or then he dribbled through traffic because he couldn't. Like, I just thought there was some tentativeness there from guys, and so I'm hoping that as the offense gets a little bit more in rhythm, guys start to understand where other guys are going to be, we start to see some of that go away. But it needs to, because Indiana's not going to beat good teams turning the ball over like this.
Yeah, I would look back and say what kind of negative trends have happened since Arkansas, and one of them is we have 4 players down. The first game with the 4 players out was Marquette. We were able to handle it. We were home. We were juiced up. Marquette's not known for pressure defenses. These 3 teams, Arkansas especially, but UC Davis did a good job of trying to defend and force Indiana to shoot threes. And what I heard from Texas Arlington is they had a lot of pressure defense. And so these young guys, for the first time, had heavy pressure. And you when you're in game pressure situations too, time and score, you revert back to your training. And young kids are still getting the bad high school habits trained out of their system, regardless if it's Romeo, Finney, Demezi, whatever. When push comes to shove and it's a tough game or tough pressure all up in you, sometimes you revert back to playing the way you did previously in your training. And good coaches spend a lot of time trying to train those bad habits out. So I think we saw a revert, certain players revert back to lazy passes, not meeting the pass at the level that needs to be done here. Now, if that's veterans doing that, you have a huge problem. But I would have to go back and look at the trends over time and see if it was the younger players, even second-year players, doing some of that, and then look at who's making the turnovers. I think that's the case in Romeo. I think Romeo's always had it a little bit easy, and now he's got some pressure, and he's got to learn that, okay, and once he steps it up, that talent is there. Same with Finney. Once he steps it up and has that attention to detail at the college level, I think those numbers will go down. And at least that's my hope, because if it trends this way, that doesn't bode well for Indiana.
You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris here with the coach, Brian Tonsoni, breaking down IU, UC Davis. Coach, let's talk a little bit about Al Durham. It was great to see him back in the lineup, to know that injury that he suffered against UT Arlington wasn't anything serious. And he had a solid line tonight, 12 points, made a couple of three-pointers, had a couple of assists. As I mentioned earlier, was 6 for 8 from the free throw line. I have kind of a theory here. Let me run this by you. Al is now, he was 2 of 3 from downtown tonight. He is now 8 of 18 from downtown. So he's, plus 40% shooting from deep, which, as we mentioned in the offseason, if he can find a three-point shot, that's really going to be lethal. Coming into this game, and again, he hadn't played a ton of minutes, his free throw rate was only 10%. So that's how many free throws he's shooting out of his total number of field goal attempts. Last year, it was 48.7%. Because he's a guy who couldn't really rely on the three-point shooting last year, was really adept at getting into the lane, going to the basket, and he's always seemed to be kind of at his best doing that. And so I thought tonight, even though he had made a 3, I thought he was really invisible offensively for a lot of the night. And, just kind of standing around the perimeter, kind of hoping to get an open shot, but not attacking. And I don't know if that's because, he's falling in love with the 3, if his back was hurting him, and maybe that was making him a little bit reticent to drive to the basket. I don't know any of that, and that could all be playing into it. But I was really glad to see him in the second half later get into the lane, draw some contact, drive in there, because he's so good at that. And if he can pair that with his improved three-point shooting, we've got a legitimate Big Ten guard in Al Durham offensively. We know what he can do defensively, and for the most part, he was good tonight after kind of a slow start. So that's the thing for me looking forward that I think will be interesting is, as he continues to shoot better from three-point range, if this is a trend more than just kind of an early season small sample size thing, does he lose some of his aggressiveness going to the basket, or does he keep that? Because I think he really needs to make sure that he continues to go to the basket, because that's, even if he's a better three-point shooter, I still think he's going to be a more effective guy getting into the lane, getting fouled, drawing the defense in that way.
No, that's a very important point. Sometimes when players hit three-point shots, it's not the worst thing for your team defensively, because then they'll fall in love with the three-point shot. Usually you say that about post guys. If a post guy or a trail 4 hits a 3, then they don't want to go back inside. So that is a concern, but it's a positive concern, that L can shoot the three. I thought his offensive game has been really, really good, short of turnovers, but I don't think he had a turnover tonight. Looking at the sheet, he had 2 assists, no turnovers.
Yeah, he didn't have one tonight.
So I like that too, and sometimes it's not necessarily the shots taken, but when, because the only one that I didn't like from him tonight, and what I thought was an outstanding performance, was at 6:34. And I don't have the score down, but
it was 54-54, I think, when it got stuck.
Okay, yeah. Right after that play you mentioned about the help side defense where there's a player cutting across, and it was Juwan or Romeo, the combination there. Really good help side defense, saved. There were 2 in a row, actually, but at 6:34, it was early, somewhat early, midway through the shot clock, and he launches a 3, and we did not go to Juwan, and we did not go to Romeo. And at that point, at 6:34, you got to go, I think, to one of those two, or take a Durham drive for a free throw, not settle for a contested 3. I thought it was a contested 3. But with that said, and that's coaching to perfection, too, because I thought L played well. I thought he gave up a couple drives early defensively, but I thought he had a really solid game. But that's a key moment that I would coach L on, saying, if you were wide open after it touched the paint, or Romeo or Juwan had it, that's one thing. But I didn't think that was a good shot at that time. But boy, it is nice to have him be healthy and play. And again, once we get everyone back, that he'll still be a huge piece. But he's got to have that inside-outside game, as you said. He can't just be an outside, fall in love with the outside shot.
What else should we say about the bench guys, if anything? I mean, I thought Demezy Anderson, we saw him get beat several times defensively, which is, kind of a theme when Demezy is out there, and you kind of know that you're going to have to kind of help a little bit more on his man. Duran looked a little bit out of sorts, not in rhythm, and Evan really couldn't get going. Anything else, stand out about those 3 guys, or just forgettable nights for all 3?
No, I think, Demezy's in a learning situation. You saw his minutes decrease from Arkansas to Texas, San Antonio to tonight. Davis, they're going to be careful with him because they're going to need him in big-time games. So I thought he could go. I almost was thinking not to have him go now, but save him for Duke if he was healthy. You just want to take care of him. And he's played so hard and I think so well coming back off that injury. And tonight was a tough night for him because their center was a three-point threat. When I looked at his shots, I don't know if John hit a 2-pointer, but previous this game he had 5 makes on the year and missed all of his 2s. So their post player was a 3-point shot. So that might not have been a game for Davis to defend in. Fitzner's the one that seems to be a little bit of struggle against pressure defenses. I think that maybe he'll be more of an effective team against teams that will trap ball screens or switch, and he can get an advantage, or he could play that pick and pop game. So we're learning a little bit about his play, that when he's left open, he can go 4 for 4 in those games. But if he's going to be guarded and pressured, I think he struggles a little bit. So, yeah, the bench was tough tonight. They came in and gave the minutes that they could, and there's some of them that are still learning or getting healthy for Big Ten play. That's why we need to get everyone else back to have some options.
Yeah, one comparison that probably needs to die is Evan Fitzner to Max Bielfeldt, because I think now that we've seen 6 games, not that I'm writing off Evan Fitzner's impact. I mean, I still think there'll be 3 or 4 games this year that he wins for Indiana, in part because he comes out there and gets 14, 15, 16 points because he gets some open looks. But Max Bielfeldt was a guy who really brought it every game and would give you tough physical play and was able to find a way to score, manufacture some points, even if his 3-point shot wasn't falling. And we're just not seeing that right now from Evan. And whether that's just him getting comfortable or what it is, he's been really up and down, really inconsistent. You would hope that, a senior like that, you kind of know what you're going to get from him coming out each game. But right now it doesn't feel like that, which, to me has been one of the bigger disappointments so far this season.
He did have 2 steals tonight and had 3 rebounds in 10 minutes. So if you're looking for something positive from Fitzner, and you know what, sometimes players play with certain combinations too, and being forced into maybe playing with, Archie had mentioned this at some point, that they're playing people that hadn't even practiced together. So again, I'm not trying to find excuses. Heck, I know as a coach, I'm tough on people, there are no excuses, but I'm looking for reasons more than excuses. So let's keep hoping that he can develop and help us.
Yeah, for sure. All right, coming up in our final segment, we hand out our game ball. That'll be easy. Take a quick look ahead to Indiana's next opponent. Should be a good one. And then in last call, we'll deliver our final thoughts on Indiana's victory over UC Davis. That's next. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I am Jerod Morris here with Coach Brian Tonsoni, and we are wrapping up our breakdown of Indiana's victory over UC Davis at Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall. The final tune-up before taking on Duke on Tuesday. This is the point in the show where we hand out our game balls. We pretty much did that in the first segment, but let's just use this segment to linger a little bit, Coach, on the great night from Juwan Morgan. Again, the numbers outstanding from Juwan tonight. He plays all 40 minutes, 31 points. He was 13 of 18 from the field, 10 rebounds. He did have 3 turnovers, which I suppose is the one blemish. But when you're handling as many possessions as he did, and playing that many minutes, you might have a turnover or two, and he did. There's one pass that stood out that probably wasn't a great one, but he was really fantastic. And as we mentioned earlier, his contributions don't show up all on the stat sheet, despite how impressive the stat sheet numbers were. He was just really good tonight. And look, we've certainly learned some things about this team through 6 games. And to me, one of the most important lessons that we have learned is this team is at its best when they're playing through Juwan Morgan. That doesn't mean that Romeo isn't the most talented offensive player. He is. He's the guy that can go get a bucket on his own the easiest. But the offense runs better. The team is more emotionally stable and into the game when Juwan Morgan is leading from the front. And so, what I kind of wonder, I do think he does sometimes tend to kind of ease his way into games a little bit, especially offensively, whether that's, him wanting other guys to get their points or whatever. I wonder if he shouldn't really come out more assertive in games and help Indiana get off to a better start. Because Romeo also seems like a guy who kind of likes to ease into things. And when you have your 2 best players both easing into things, now it's like you're relying on Rob Finney and Justin Smith and, Al Durham or whoever else is out there with those guys to pick up the slack offensively. I'd rather see Juwan just come out and grab 8 points early on and then kind of lead the way. And maybe that would help get everybody else going rather than thinking he should be a little bit less assertive. So I don't know if that's the mentality he brings into the games. It just kind of feels like it a little bit, and that's one change I would like to see from him moving forward.
If it's his mentality, I would say, yeah, he needs to be aggressive within the scope of the game plan. Sometimes the game plan is to get other people going and let your stars fill in when they're ready. That's a big debate in the coaching world. Do you go early to your stars to get them going and then hope people feed off of them, or do you run the offense? And I'm almost to the point now, if I were Archie, to say, with a couple of games of slow starts, is let's feed that ball inside and get him going. But, Michael Jordan never got going. He fed the ball to Cartwright in that triangle offense back when the Bulls were good. You probably were a toddler back then.
I remember those good Bulls teams. I love those teams.
So, I talk in class now about the Bulls, and everyone kind of looks at me. They weren't even born when the Bulls. But Jordan used to be scoreless until 5 minutes in the first quarter and end up with 35-40. So there's different philosophies out there, but it was a little concerning to me, Jerod, today that I thought early in the game Romeo and Juwan weren't getting shots. In fact, my second line on my notepad today is "Who's shooting?" ?
Yeah.
Because of the point that you made. Now, whether that was them that's their mentality as players, or whether that was strategy, that's the one thing I would like to know. But nonetheless, the shot selection concerned me early until Juwan started feeling it, and then he was just going to shoot everything. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I would like to think that that would help if they came out a little more aggressive early.
Yeah, and Michael says in the chat, not going to criticize Juwan for crying out loud. Juwan has been our rock for 2 years. Absolutely. This is not meant as a criticism at all. And I agree with you, Coach. Like, I think, sometimes, especially if you have like one star who's kind of the clear guy, get the other 4 guys involved. But context is everything. And we don't know what the game plan is either. So we're, talking out of our rumps here on a lot of this stuff, but just kind of basing it on what we see. But I just wonder if, given the context of this team and what we know of Romeo kind of being a guy who seems to ease his way in, if given that, maybe just for a couple of games, and especially against Duke on the road, really focus on getting Juwan going right off the bat. That's all I'm saying, because maybe it'll help us get off to better starts than what we've seen. Not a criticism of him at all. In fact, it's, let's maybe position him to be more the focal point early on and make that a coaching focus. So whether he wants to ease into the game or not, he's not allowed to. You just go right down to him and let's get off to a good start.
Yeah, and it is just interesting. The guy I coach for, we talk about that. How many shots do you want your best player to get, and when do you want him to be in the game? And sometimes we have some knockdown, drag-out arguments on when the best player should get his shots and how many, and the need for other players to get their shots. And that's what's so fun about coaching, is that there are two ways to do it. But I do think it's going to be taken into consideration now because of the two best players not getting quality shots until 7-8 minutes into the game. And I think that was a guess as far as the minutes. Yeah. But it did concern me early, the lack of shots for Romeo. And I wrote that down Sunday, too, when I was on the post game. The last game I saw, I thought it took way too long for Romeo to get involved. And then Romeo got hot at the second half and kind of got Indiana back into a position to play after halftime. So it seems like that's a little trend, too, that the better players are taking some time to get going, and we have been behind in those situations. So I'd like to go back and see what happened in Marquette game when we got off to who got hot early.
Everybody was hot early in that one. We're forcing those turnovers and transition. That game was a bit of an outlier.
So, I think that's at least something now that's going to be looked and discussed after watching film in the coaching room.
So let's make it official. Game ball, Juwan Morgan. Game ball, Juwan Morgan for you too.
Yes.
All right, so this is usually the point in the night where we talk about Indiana's upcoming opponent. Of course, Indiana playing Duke on Tuesday, the 27th. That is a late game. That'll be 9:30 Eastern time start. Late game, late post-game show. So we all need to have our rest prior to that one. We will spend some time on Banner Monday talking IU Duke. I haven't figured out exactly what segments we'll do. We'll definitely spend some time talking about that. Obviously, have the post-game show after that. You look at this, I'll be interested to see what you think about this, Coach. Duke lost to Gonzaga. Shockingly, they're not going to go undefeated, and the talk of them being able to beat an NBA team, maybe it can stop now. I think it's good that Duke lost, because I think the veneer of invincibility is gone. And now it's not in the back of your minds when you go up there that you might be playing Jesus Christ and the 12 disciples, to use an A.J. Moye term. But that, granted, a great Gonzaga team beat them. They might be the best team in the country, But I think, for Indiana to go in there and having seen them get beat, I think that helps subconsciously Indiana's mentality. The flip side, of course, is, well, now Duke's going to be angry and they're going to be focused because they lost, yada, yada. I don't care. I think it's a net positive that we saw Duke get beat. We saw a way they get beat. This team can go in there believing a little bit more than they can beat them because they've seen it happen. So, look, I think there are many, many more reasons to think that Duke is going to win, and probably win comfortably, than there are to think that Indiana is going to win, especially given Indiana's troubles, with injuries. But I feel a little bit better about it having seen them lose a game. Do you think that was a positive that they lost to Gonzaga heading into this game?
Well, I think that, and I would say also that was a score of Auburn. I did not get to see the Duke-Auburn game, but that score was 78-72, I believe, or something. They were in the 70s. And so sometimes being in the mid-80s and mid-70s when you got a juggernaut like Duke is good too, regardless of wins and losses, that they're not just dropping 90 and 120 or whatever. Like, after the first night, everyone was ready to crown them. And I know you got the drop line ready of mine, but
nope. I don't want to jinx it. We're getting closer to game time now.
Don't bring that out. But here's my look at. So I think you're right. I think that shows other teams that, hey, you go in there and play a darn near perfect, because the margin for error is almost nil for the Indiana Hoosiers, in my opinion. That they can be beat, along with the way they played the last two games. If you're a good team, you can go in there and compete with Duke. Now it's harder at Duke and the officials, and never going to be called for fouls and all that stuff. But I think Indiana playing their best defense can can have a shot, and I know that's a great offense and great players, but Indiana has played some solid defense. Just wonder if there's enough offense with the turnovers recently in that to prevent some breakouts and easy offensive points. So but I do think that Duke doesn't play outstanding defense as well. So if we can take care of the ball, I think we can score on Duke. It's just, do we have enough points in there at Duke to get it done?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, obviously Romeo and Juwan are going to have to play like superstars to give us a shot. That's clear. Rob Finney is going to have to go into a really tough environment and, play Trey Jones really well, another freshman guard. And I think the other big key is Justin Smith. You play a game like this, you need your supreme athletes to play really well. He's going to have to play 30-plus minutes. He's going to have to be focused. He's going to have to make plays. And, I think that how Justin Smith plays, I think will tell us a lot about this game. If we come on here and he played 20 minutes and had 7 points and a couple of rebounds and wasn't a factor, Indiana probably lost by 20. And if it's a close game, I think we're coming in here and Justin Smith is a guy we're talking about for a game ball, because I think he's going to be that important in this game, given the talent and the athleticism that Duke has. All right, we'll talk about that more on Banner Monday. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Remember that because you're an Assembly Call listener, you get 15% off your entire order at HoosierProud.com and at HomefieldApparel.com. So if you want officially licensed IU gear, go to HomefieldApparel.com. And if you want one of our Assembly Call logo t-shirts or one of Hoosier Proud's unique Indiana-inspired designs, visit HoosierProud.com. And on both sites, use the promo code ASSEMBLY at checkout for 15% off your entire order. All right, Coach, it is time for last call. Your final thoughts on a tough, worrisome, I suppose in some ways discouraging, but ultimately successful night at Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall.
Indiana is one tip away from being 6-0, despite having multiple, and I mean 4 or 5 injured players. That has taken away a strength of theirs, which is supposed to be depth. Indiana has faced some adversity and lost, came back with a day's preparation, lost some players inside of that game, came back again. Within the game tonight, handled some adversity. Those things can only be banked as positive deposits down the road. This team is different, even though there are some trends that we as fans don't like to see offensively and defensively. This team and this program is different, a lot more competitive. They're in for a battle royal on Tuesday and a tough stretch of 5 games, but this team is going to win more of those than lose, and we just need to stay with it. And proud of the guys, proud of the people showing up and cheering on the guys at the Assembly Hall, and we just got to keep fighting. And every day's a new day, and I'm just very positive about Indiana basketball, even though this week of 3 games has been a little bit tough. I think it's bound to turn around soon.
Yep. And, on the positive note, we won this game. That's progress, despite the fact that I didn't feel like it for much of the night. The KenPom numbers just got updated, by the way. Indiana 23rd as I'm reading this. Interestingly, the defense drops to 29th, the offense 24th. So KenPom was not a fan of Indiana's defense. A lot of that, again, that's adjusted for competition and given how bad UC Davis's offense was. So as their offense gets a little bit better, the negative impact of this game could be negated a little bit. But for tonight, had an impact. Just a couple of interesting numbers. Juwan Morgan, currently 28th in the country in three-point percentage with his 60% shooting. His numbers across the board just look outstanding. His offensive rating is 133rd, which is 108th. That's really, really good for a guy assuming the role that he is, where he's using 25% of Indiana's possessions. So he's really just off to a really nice start numbers-wise this year. Coach, Indiana's 69th in the country in three-point shooting, which is not something anybody would have expected. Chris, our buddy from IU Artifacts in the chat, mentioned that, in the chat about, is that a concern moving forward? Can Juwan sustain this? Can Al sustain this? Who knows? It doesn't. Certainly, that number doesn't feel sustainable. But through 6 games, you are seeing Indiana make a lot more of the open shots than they did last year. So that's at least a positive. Indiana 4th overall in effective field goal percentage. So despite what has felt like an offense that has really struggled at times, the numbers are pretty good. At least some of them. But on the downside, the turnover number 238th in the country. So that'll obviously have to get a lot better. So. Just a few numbers there real quick. We'll dig into some more of those on Banner Monday, but Yeah, as we mentioned, Indiana only leads for 5.5 minutes, but, the way that they were able to get that lead and keep that lead and sustain it, to me, is what you build on from this game. The defense really led the way again, and that's what we're seeing from this team is when they really play well, the defense is leading the way, it's leading to offense, it leads to open shots, and good defense seems to lead to rhythm offense in a sense, and so I've wanted this to be a program that is built on its defense and that, forges an identity of defense. And I think we're seeing that. And we're seeing Indiana's star player, Juwan Morgan, really lead the way in that because his defense has been really good. So, that's what I take away from tonight. Hopefully we can get healthy because we're not going to win a ton of games with guys playing this many minutes. I think it's nice to see Indiana's best players playing this many minutes, but it's not going to be sustainable. So hopefully we get some guys healthy. And hopefully we can go up there on Tuesday and really play well. And look, you could go up to Duke and you could play really well and you could lose the game, but have some things to take away from it. Don't send this segment to Archie Miller because we know what he thinks about that. But you want to go up there, have most of your guys there, and give it your best shot. And if Indiana does that, they could give themselves a chance to win that game. So that's what I'm hoping to see. Have something to build on because it's a tough string of games after that. But what Indiana really needed to do most in this 2-game stretch against UT Arlington and UC Davis was avoid a disaster and avoid any more crippling injuries. And while it seemed like that may not have happened after UT Arlington with the injuries, we saw Duran, Romeo, and Al all back on the court. We saw Devontae and Zach McRoberts both dressed and warming up, though they didn't play. I think Race Thompson might have been too, or at least he's getting closer. So that's one of the other biggest positives is you got out of these 2 games without a disaster. No more big injuries were suffered. Hopefully you're getting healthy, and we can start to see what this team is made of here over this next 5-game stretch because we're going to learn a lot about the Hoosiers, and hopefully what we learn is positive moving forward. Alrighty, that'll do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure you join us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. You can also subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We will be back to talk IU hoops again with you on Monday afternoon. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Thank you for being here and for listening to this episode of the Assembly Call. We appreciate it. And we really do rely on the support of audience members like you to keep our show going and to keep growing. And so we have set up a page on our website at assemblycall.com/support that lists 5 ways that you can support the Assembly Call. And we encourage you to choose whichever method is the easiest and most convenient for you. One of the methods is donating, and so many of you have donated, and we appreciate it so much. On that page, you can choose a monthly recurring donation or an annual recurring donation or just a one-time donation, whatever works for you. And if you don't want to donate, another way to support the show is you can use our affiliate URLs, iutickets.shop or iustore.shop when you're going to shop for tickets or gear, and we will get paid a small commission when you use those links. But however you support the show, we appreciate it. Thank you.